For Bitcoin holders, when they try to participate in, say, smart contract, say a lending protocol, or they try to earn yield, there's nothing natively on the Bitcoin chain because the Bitcoin chain was designed to be just a payment system. So staking is a very part of the smart contract economy, and Bitcoiners have never been able to participate in that natively. And we designed a protocol which enabled that. And we have many other plans to extend this to other smart contract protocols as well.
So could you get Bitcoin as fast as Solana or something?
So basically, our technology reduces 1 gigabyte to about 1,000 bits. Right, so that's the magic, okay?
Hey, Soheil here. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick before we begin, if you enjoyed this episode, if you learned something, please consider to follow or subscribe or share this episode. That helps us out a lot. It helps us to reach more people and to spread quality education across the space about crypto and Web3. Also, if you're part of a crypto project or represent one and you would like to come on the show or do sponsoring, please get in touch with us. And lastly, everything we talk about today is for educational purposes and no financial advice. Enjoy the show. David, lovely to have you on the TEACHMEDEFI podcast.
Great to be here, Soheil.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because, Babylon is a super exciting protocol. You guys have gotten a lot of adoption, and I just want to get into it. And obviously, your background is super unique and amazing. So, thank you for coming on the show. And perhaps we start off with, for listeners new to Babylon, how would you summarize what it makes possible for Bitcoin holders and why this hasn't been possible before?
Yeah. So for Bitcoin holders, when they try to participate in, say, smart contract, say a lending protocol, or they try to earn yield, then there's very little option. There's nothing natively on the Bitcoin chain because the Bitcoin chain was designed to be just a payment system. And even that was not really used that much as a store value. So to be able to participate, they basically have to wrap the Bitcoin into a wrapped Bitcoin like WBTC, cBTC, and participate in that form. But lots of Bitcoiners do not want to do that because that is through a centralized custodian. In the case of WBTC and cBTC, actually. And in the jargon of Bitcoiners is not your keys, not your coin. So what Babylon provides is the ability for Bitcoiners to natively, self-custodially participate in the smart contract economy. Currently, the protocol that Bitcoin we have launched is called Bitcoin staking. So staking is a very part of the smart contract economy. Staking is kind of one of the fundamental DeFi activity. And Bitcoiners have never been able to participate in that natively. And we designed a protocol, we built a protocol, we launched a protocol which enabled that. And we have many other plans to extend this to other smart contract protocols as well.
That's super exciting, and we'll get to those plans as well. But perhaps we also talk about your background a bit because, in researching that, I was quite amazed. You have had very meaningful contributions to wireless information theory. Can you tell us a bit about that and like what compelled you to transition into blockchain and crypto research?
Yeah, one of the biggest revolution in technology in the past 20 years is in wireless communication. So the fact that we have a device on our hands that everyone can communicate to everybody and to all the data is kind of a breaking change to how technology works. And I was lucky because in the early days of my career, the wireless revolution has just started. And there are a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built to enable that wireless communication infrastructure, these devices. And so I was doing research in something called information theory. Information theory, you can think of as like cryptography. Cryptography is the foundation of blockchains. Information theory is the foundation of wireless communication or foundation of communications in general. So I was doing the foundational work, information theory, and I find wireless communication as an amazing area to apply the theory to in order to make a real impact. And so I was lucky because actually some of my algorithms from this information theory work became standard from third generation 3G to 4G to 5G. And today, every cell phone, basically every cell phone uses my algorithm.
That is amazing. What does that feel like? That's really cool achievement.
Yeah, it feels like that if you get to at the basement level when a new technology is being developed, then what you can do can make huge impact on how the technology develops because you kind of get it at the ground level. And I think that kind of achievement is in part luck, in part some observation of technology trend. So I think that's sort of the feeling is good.
Yeah, I mean, it must be cool to just like go out and about and see people using their phones and be like, okay, I meaningfully contributed to how this works. I always felt like as a musician, it must be also cool to just be somewhere completely different from where you're from and then just hear your music play in a car or on the bus or something.
Yeah, and unfortunately, wireless is something that is kind of hidden, right? And I think that's sort of the blessing and curse of infrastructure, is that infrastructure is something hidden. People don't really see it, right? You don't see the infrastructure. All you see is, I don't know, on your phone, all you see is like FaceTime, a camera, and you can see the video. But behind all that, there's a lot of infrastructure to enable that to happen end to end. And people don't see it, but it's happening. And every bit of information you need is actually enabled by that infrastructure.
And you take it for granted quite quickly, isn't it? Like that there's sort of this entitlement immediately to it almost. Recently I was on a flight and it said, I don't know if it was the first flight or one of the first commercial flights of that airline, but it said something like the first one to have Starlink on board, right? For internet. And to me, that was also the first time I ever used it in general. And of course, on a plane, it was amazing. I mean, you could just stream stuff normally, and it felt so seamless. And then speaking to this like entitlement or taking it for granted, like my wife was scrolling kind of through there as if it was nothing. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like you can never do this usually. She was like, huh? I can't? I don't know. Or whatever. And then she didn't even like took notice of it. And then on the next flight where we didn't have Starlink, she was like, oh, right. This is not working. Like, so.
And it's also, I think, a function of age. People who are young, who grew up with the cell phones always there, easily take it for granted. For people from an early generation like me, we're seeing phones that are like this big, right? I don't know your age, but in the days of pre-iPhone, people are kind of like, the bigger your phone, the better your status symbol is. It's like a status symbol. The fact that you have a very big phone means that you're very special because you're the only one who has a phone, and the phone means like huge phone.
Yeah.
And you just put it on the table beside you to show your status symbol. It's like wearing Rolex or something like that.
It's so funny. People and the games we play, I guess. But so is that like how you saw Bitcoin then in a similar way? Like early days of a new infrastructure? Or do you even view it like communication rails even?
No, I think certainly, I mean, blockchains operate on networks, certainly. And communication has a role to play in blockchains. But that's not really why I get into blockchain. What I get in blockchain is sort of the general understanding that is the analogy to me is the getting into a technology when the infrastructure is in the early stage can make a lot of impact. I've done that before. And so I'm trying to do it again.
And do you still teach at Stanford? You're a professor at Stanford, is that correct?
Yes, I teach at Stanford. In fact, I have done research in blockchains for about 6-7 years now. I started a research group in Stanford to focus primarily, or actually to focus entirely on blockchain. In fact, my research group is probably the only research group at Stanford which focus exclusively on blockchain research.
Why did you make this step into like a commercial, like founding Babylon, like a commercial project?
So I should tell you a little bit of story how my technology actually get into everybody's cell phone. And the story is very simple. As an academic, right, you write papers, you write books. That's what you do at a university. However, to make a real impact on a product, you have to interact with the commercial world. And my interaction there was I spent 6 months at a company called Qualcomm. Qualcomm was the leader of wireless technology innovation at that time. And so my algorithms got into the standards through Qualcomm. When I was working at Qualcomm, I translated some of the information theory work into actual algorithms that people can implement on cell phones, on base stations. And so my innovation was through a company, which is Qualcomm. At that time, it was a startup. It was basically a startup, but then became very big. And so I feel like to make an impact on technology, it's not enough just to write research papers in the university. One has to go out to the real world. And in the case of blockchain, crypto, the real world is basically startup. Startup is the main avenue of essentially making an impact on practice.
Are you like an avid learner? Like, did you see how did it happen? You read the Bitcoin white paper, and then did you like go and read a lot about it, learn about it? Because there's so many different fields coming together. You know, like zero knowledge, game theory, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So I think if you spend all your time reading papers, you can read papers forever and not do a single thing. My usual mode of operation in terms of doing research is you learn by actually identifying an interesting problem. And by focusing your mind on trying to solve that problem, you learn things on the way. So the first problem I was thinking about, this was 2018, 2019 timeframe, was when I read the Nakamoto's white paper. And my question to myself was, hey, this is great. Amazing ideas. But there's a problem here, which is, why is this blockchain so slow? Why is it only one block every 10 minutes and only 5 transactions per second? This is very slow. And from a communication person point of view, we're used to like megabits of data, gigabits of data, very fast communication link. If you measure that speed of throughput of Bitcoin, then you'll think it's like, hey, it's like going back to the era of telephone modems. The speed of Bitcoin is like telephone modem. So therefore, I realized that communication is not the bottleneck of Bitcoin. But the reason Bitcoin is slow is not because the communication link is very slow. We have much faster communication link since the telephone modem. So the question I asked is that, well, what is the bottleneck? Is the bottleneck fundamental to any consensus protocol, or is it peculiar to Bitcoin? And so my first question was to understand what is the fundamental limit of throughput and latency. Is Bitcoin getting to the fundamental limit, or is it very far away from it? If it's very far away from it, can we improve Bitcoin to hit very close to the fundamental limit? So these are the questions I asked myself, and that was my first paper. So I learned by actually writing a paper. That was still one of the papers I'm most proud of in blockchains.
Why that one you're most proud of?
Because it actually completely solved the questions I asked, which is there what are the fundamental limits that faces a protocol like Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin very far away? And 3 is, how do we get to the limit? So we answer all these questions in a very clean way. And we came up with a quite nice protocol that actually some Bitcoiners still talk to me about it. Yeah.
Okay. And what are the limits? Because, yeah, I agree. It is quite slow, especially if you look to proof of stake chains.
Yeah, basically the limit is speed of light. The latency limit is speed of light. And the throughput limit is basically your communication bandwidth. You should be able to get throughput at the communication bandwidth. So if you are sending if you're sending megabits per second of data in your communication link, you should be able to get throughput at that speed. In fact, many of the new protocols are realizing this limit right now. So right now in proof of stake protocols, they are in fact, some of them are hitting the limits, and they're in some sense based on some ideas that we promoted at that time with this paper. We were doing it in the context of Bitcoin, so it's proof of work. But some of the ideas are actually quite similar to the ideas that existing or new protocols are using in proof of stake to hit those limits.
So could you get Bitcoin as fast as Solana or something?
All right. So Solana is a little bit different. Okay. Solana is getting to a high throughput limit through this idea called vertical scaling. Vertical scaling, which means that they're using very fast servers. But these servers are not amenable to individuals, right? Individuals can't really run Solana servers. So this is called vertical scaling. The problem we were talking about was what we call horizontal scaling, which is more along the lines of Bitcoin or Ethereum. So horizontal scaling means that each node doesn't have to be very powerful. And this allows many, many people to participate. But at the same time, you want your throughput to kind of scale with the number of nodes. The more nodes there are, you're hoping the higher throughput. And we were able to achieve that. And this is based on an idea which is called, it used to be called sharding, and now is evolved into this idea called roll-ups, which is to basically do this horizontal scaling.
So are we going to see, why don't we have that on Bitcoin yet? Why is Bitcoin not much faster yet? Or are we seeing...
Oh, because Bitcoin cannot be changed. So one thing is that Bitcoin is very slow to change. So actually, that's one thing we learned, right? We wrote this paper which says that if Bitcoin is changed in certain ways, then you can get very high throughput and very high, very short latency. But then we quickly realized that there's a problem with converting our paper from theory to an actual system, is that Bitcoin does not change very easily. Bitcoin is one of the slowest changing protocols. Roughly speaking, every 4 years, there will be a minor change. And bigger changes, like increasing the block size, led to something called Bitcoin block size wall, which split Bitcoin into two chains, actually. And so, therefore, making changes on Bitcoin is terribly difficult.
But is that a social problem?
Yes, I think it's to some extent a social problem, because Bitcoin doesn't really have any foundation. So there's no leadership. So everything that needs to be passed is essentially requires almost unanimous approval by the core developers. And as you know, in any area, to get unanimous approval is impossible. Not to mention that in Bitcoin, a lot of these core developers have very strong opinion about Bitcoin. So it's almost impossible to get unanimous approval.
So Babylon builds on Bitcoin, right? So what is your vision for the network and
Yeah. So because of this experience, right, of difficulty of changing Bitcoin, Babylon is based on a totally different philosophy. Babylon's philosophy is that we build protocols on top of Bitcoin, but we never change Bitcoin itself. And we never say that, oh, if you pass a certain soft fork of Bitcoin core protocol, then we could do this. No. You may have heard of things like OPCAT or OPCTV. These are so-called new opcodes that people propose. And Babylon philosophy is that we never design a protocol based on these new opcodes, because we don't know when they will happen, if at all they will happen. We just build protocols based on Bitcoin as it is. It's like It's like, when you get married, people give good advice. Is that marry your wife or your husband as he or she is. Never try to marry someone with the expectation, with the hope that someone will change into some other person. So we follow the same philosophy for Bitcoin.
Nice analogy. So I assume that it requires more creativity on your part, right? Like there's a constrained set of choices you can make. You have to work with what's there. Do you enjoy that?
Yeah, I think, engineering. So I'm an engineer. I'm a researcher. I'm also an engineer. Engineers are completely familiar and used to this concept of constraints. There are no systems in which there are no constraints. So we work given the constraints, try to do the best we can do.
Yeah, and you guys, so Babylon's staking system relies on some things on Bitcoin, right? Like time locked taproot outputs, right? So maybe
Yeah.
we get more into the weeds. Like, how do you use Bitcoin to ensure to deliver these services that Babylon does, while still keeping with some primitives that are important to people like self custody and so on?
Yeah. So it turns out that we only need to use two core primitive of Bitcoin, two core opcodes of Bitcoin, two core properties of Bitcoin. One is the time lock you mentioned, and two is the fact that if you know a secret, then you can sign and spend a Bitcoin. The secret, basically your private key. If you know your private key, then you can sign and spend a Bitcoin. So those two are the most basic functionality of Bitcoin, and that those two are the only ones we use actually in almost all our protocols we built.
So beautiful simplicity in a way.
Yeah. So constraint, yes, but the constraint kind of forces you to have very simple protocol in some sense, at least simple in terms of interaction with Bitcoin.
Right. So maybe can you run me through a example of how a user would interact with Babylon, for what reason, and what he would do on chain?
Yeah. So let me give you an example of the protocol we're building right now. I'm always interested in the present and the future, but I think it captures similar idea as the Bitcoin staking. So here's an example, okay? Suppose you have one Bitcoin, okay? As I said, you don't want to give it to Coinbase or WBTC. So you have this one Bitcoin, you don't know what to do with it. Now, you don't want to sell your Bitcoin though, because you think your Bitcoin will go up in price all the time. So, however, you want to extract some Bitcoin, and one value you want is you really want some USDC. Okay, you really want to borrow some USDC to, if you're a miner, maybe you're interested in paying for your energy bill. Energy bill you can't pay using Bitcoin, but you do have Bitcoin. So, what you want to do is to use Bitcoin as a collateral to borrow some USDC. Okay, so that's your objective. Right now, there's no such thing you can do without basically wrapping your Bitcoin. So here's what our protocol can do, okay? So our protocol says that, okay, you can lock your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain, self-custodial, okay? You can lock it. And this Bitcoin is now used as a collateral for a lending protocol on Ethereum, say Aave or Morpho. Those are the two top lending protocols, okay? All right, so how does that work? Now you have a collateral, and now you want to use this collateral on the lending protocol, and the lending protocol somehow can observe the fact that you've locked this one Bitcoin, okay? And the condition is such that you can only get back this Bitcoin if you return the loan properly without the collateral being liquidated. And I can basically design my scheme on Bitcoin in such a way that based on the smart contract state that you've returned the loan, this smart contract state, I can create a proof. And this proof can be used by me to get back my Bitcoin. Okay, so this is the kind of system that we are building right now, is to use the state of the spot contract on Ethereum. I generate a proof of that state and use that proof to convince Bitcoin to let me have my Bitcoin back.
When you say have my Bitcoin back, it never left your wallet, it's just locked.
Yeah, it's locked in an address, okay, that has several conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And the main condition is that I myself can get back that Bitcoin. But only if I present the proper condition that I've returned the loan. So it's self-custodial. It's a self-custodial in the sense that I don't have to ask anyone else for permission to get back my Bitcoin. But it's not like I can get back my Bitcoin anytime I want, because after all, this is the collateral. If I can get back my Bitcoin anytime I want, then nobody will lend me the stable coin.
Yeah.
So the stable coin lenders have to understand that indeed your Bitcoin is a proper collateral, in the sense that you can only get back the collateral if you have returned the loan. So the contract is very clear to the lenders, so that the lenders will offer to lend you the money.
So the contracts on Ethereum, they have to also approve of your Babylon logic to be accepted as collateral.
Correct. So in lending contract, typically you create a so-called market. You create a market, and the market has a collateral and a lending asset pair. And in the case of Bitcoin, this protocol that we're building, we call it trustless Bitcoin Vault. In this case, the collateral is basically native Bitcoin. The native Bitcoin, and the lending asset is USDC in this example.
And I assume you use zero knowledge proofs for this?
Yes, we use zero knowledge proof because one of the key property of zero knowledge proof is that they're very short. They're very short. And that enables us to effectively do many things that is impossible to do without the ZK proof technology. However, actually, the most innovative part of our technology is not the ZK proof, because ZK proof by now is kind of a well-established technology that many other companies are building. So we are not building that. We're just using like other companies, other projects, existing ZK knowledge proof. The main innovation that we are doing is actually how Bitcoin can verify the ZK proof.
I was going to ask you that. How does that work? Do you store a verifier key on Bitcoin chain, or?
Yeah, so if you think about Ethereum, if you replace Bitcoin by Ethereum, in fact, Ethereum knows how to verify ZK proof, because you can write a smart contract of the logic of the ZK verifier and put that on Ethereum. If you want to do the same thing for Bitcoin, you face two problems, okay? One problem is that the verifier size is about 1 gigabyte in terms of Bitcoin script. So Bitcoin doesn't have a smart contract, but it does have a language called Bitcoin script, okay? But if you hack, so a lot of people actually in the past 2 years work very hard, and even with a lot of optimization already, the ZK verifier size is 1 gigabyte, okay? Now, if you compute, one Bitcoin block is about 4 megabytes, okay? So you can do the math. 1 gigabyte is about 200 or 250 blocks, okay? And the second problem is that Bitcoin doesn't have persistent memory. So that means that you have to send this 250 block of verifier every time you want to verify something. So obviously not practical. So basically our technology reduces this 1 gigabyte, okay, to about 1,000 bits.
How?
Right, so that's the magic, okay? So, all right. So we figure out a cryptographic method, okay? which is called Gabo circuit, which basically allows us to take all this verification. Instead of on the Bitcoin chain, you do the verification off chain. In other words, in your own computer, okay, in your own Mac laptop, okay? With the following property, that if the verification is correct, okay, then a secret will be revealed, decrypted from this off-chain verification. And the secret is used to prove to Bitcoin that the verification is correct or incorrect. And as I said earlier, the Bitcoin only knows how to do two things. One is time lock, and two is using a secret to spend a Bitcoin. And so we're doing both of that. We're using a time lock to give a period of time for the off-chain verification to do their work. And we are allowing the secret to spend the Bitcoin if the verifier can come up with the secret before the time lock expires.
So it is expecting a specific secret.
The secret is set up when the Bitcoin is first deposited. And when the secret is revealed, then the secret can be spent, the Bitcoin can be spent and returned to the wallet of the depositor, because now the correct return of the deposit, in my example, is executed on Ethereum.
And it's not possible for the off-chain person to fake serving the secret because it can't know what it is, basically.
Yes. So the cryptographic guarantee is that the off-chain person can only get the secret if the proof is correct.
So if the proof shows that this specific action was indeed done on Ethereum, right? Like according to the circuit, the circuit has defined the logic of that action on Ethereum. And
got it. Yes, that's right. So the circuit has defined the relation that you want to prove on Ethereum, which in this example is whether the loan is repaid. Whether the loan is repaid is the state on Ethereum, and checking that state is embedded into the verification circuit, the Gabo circuit that I mentioned.
Right.
And by running the circuit, you can check whether the state is achieved. And if the state is achieved, the secret is decrypted by running this Gabo circuit.
Okay. And it serves you back that secret, which was set when the ZK circuit was created?
Yes.
Is that when it's set? Okay.
Yes, that's right. When you deposit the money, the circuit is created. The secret is hidden in the circuit.
With the rule, only reveal me if this circuit conducts correctly.
Yes. So cryptography, in the early days, the very beginning of cryptography is invented to hide secret, to hide secret, right? So imagine in the Allies in the Second World War, the Germans were using cryptography to hide the secret of the communication, and the Allies were trying to extract the secret. Here, the secret is essentially used to prove the correctness of something. So that's kind of a twist on the use of cryptography, is to use cryptography to essentially prove whether something is correct or incorrect. And if only when you're correct, then you can extract the secret.
Yeah, it is kind of beautiful, I guess.
Very beautiful. It took us a few years to figure the thing out, and
figuring it out, is it a conceptual breakthrough? Or just like, oh, what about we do it this way? Or is it like a iterative sort of?
It's iterative because, in fact, our earlier solution was based on this idea of putting the ZK verifier on chain. And as I mentioned, 1 gigabyte is just too big. And we were doing a lot of engineering to cut it down even more. But at the end of the day, it's just too big. And so one day, kind of, we came to the understanding that, hey, Bitcoin only knows 2 basic things: secret revelation and time lock. Why don't we shift our thinking, instead of verification directly on chain, try to extract the secret? And then the tools that we have available are actually pretty old-fashioned. Garble circuit is actually technology invented about 40 years ago. So it's not like we have to invent some new cryptography, but it's almost like a change of point of view.
Yeah, it was a philosophical change. It wasn't a technological. I mean, it resulted from it, but it was that you rethought how to do it, basically.
Yeah, I would say it's almost like a problem formulation change. You change the way you formulate the problem.
Yes. I mean, this aligns super nicely with sort of like what David Deutsch says on epistemology. Do you know David Deutsch?
No, I don't know him. Who is David Deutsch?
He's considered like the father of quantum computing, and he writes on epistemology, so the theory of knowledge, growth of knowledge. Got an amazing book named Beginning of Infinity. I hope to get him on the podcast someday. That would make my year or my life. And he says that the growth of knowledge always starts with a problem. So it's the selection of the problem with which it starts. And I thought that was kind of beautiful. And sometimes when I talk to people like you, I notice these fundamental ideas pop up, because you talked about problems now a couple of times, and also now in terms of the solution was found because you looked at the problem, you reformulated the problem.
Correct. As I mentioned, the way I learn how to do research, you started the podcast asking me about how I learn, how I do research, how I learn new stuff. I learned by essentially trying to formulate new problems.
Yes, that's what you said earlier. That was the thing, right? So, and that aligns beautifully, because that's how you create knowledge. You meaning you, David. That's because how you've been creating knowledge effectively, clearly. So it starts with a problem. So would you say it's better, because this is something I've been thinking about as well, like passive learning and active learning, right? It sounds like it to me. Are you a friend of reducing the time of passive learning as much as you can, and like going in there and just doing actively and like working on a problem, like you said?
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of active learning. I try to dissuade my students to read many papers even before they have a clear problem, because I feel like by reading too many papers, your brain is completely influenced by how people have been thinking about the research area in the past. If you want a new point of view, a new formulation, it's better that you just think about it. And then, of course, you can read other people's papers afterwards, but you should have a crack at thinking about it from first principles first.
Because you only encounter something for the first time once, right? This is
Exactly.
also something. David Deutsch has an amazing quote on this. I don't remember it. Maybe we can overlay it in the episode. But it was basically about education, because you're given problems. You are given the problems you're supposed to think about, and you are giving the solutions to which you have to arrive. It's like completely backwards, because it's it wastes this first time of encountering something, because it already tries to define it for you. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes a total lot of sense, right? In fact, that's one reason why sometimes a lot of breakthrough is in research in many areas is done by young people and not older people, because young people are able to see the thing for the first time, and they have not been colored by how all the people before them has been looking at the problem.
Yeah, so this was the thing, that children have the disabilities wasted because they encounter things for the first time and they can creatively work on that. So do you encourage your students to kind of find their own problems and work on them? A lot of research these days, or like the administrative side, right, of universities has become that you have to define before you work on something what you're gonna find. Like, this is what I'm gonna find with my research, which is completely crazy because obviously the growth of knowledge is unpredictable, and you're just supposed to work on a problem you find interesting.
Yeah, so that's the unfortunate thing about the funding agency. When you write proposals, people are so conservative that they want basically you to already know what the answer is when you write a funding proposal, that they'll give you money. Well, if I already know what the answer is, why do I need your money to fund my research? And so a lot of professors are basically just doing a stupid thing, which is they already done the research, and then they write a proposal on that, and then they use the money to do future research that they want to do. So it's kind of stupid. The whole thing is kind of stupid operation. And that's really unfortunate because people just get to be very conservative in what they fund. They're worried about making mistakes. They're worried about funding people who have crazy ideas and they don't pan out. But of course, good research, most of them should not pan out. Imagine, suppose every problem I propose, I can solve it. Then it means that what I'm proposing is not very interesting because if all the problems I propose I can solve, that means I'm not aggressive enough and ambitious enough in finding new problems, because new problems, most of the time, you may not be able to get an answer.
Yeah. And researching something is often more like creating theories of all the things that don't work, right? Like,
Yeah.
you find all these ways that it doesn't work. Speaking of Babylon more concretely, with these trustless vaults and the staking concept, do you think Bitcoin's role will become something larger overall in crypto? And because currently it's more like, okay, I'll save in Bitcoin or something, right? That's my store of value.
So I would like to think that we're trying to create a win-win situation between Bitcoin and the rest of crypto. Right now, you have Bitcoin and rest of crypto in a smart contract proof of stake chains, completely quite isolated, right? The connection between them is very, very little. And what we believe is that if Bitcoin can more actively participate in smart contract economy, both sides will benefit. Bitcoin will have more use cases. Crypto will benefit from having a very big asset injecting into the economy. Win-win situation.
Mm. And you already have 6 billion locked?
Yeah, 6.5 billion, 6.3, 6.5 billion.
Within 1 year, roughly, right?
1 year, yeah, 1 year.
Do you have other goals to hit in terms of that metric, or are you just building the tech?
So this 6 billion is for staking.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're building the tech, expanding it to other DeFi protocols, including lending. So we have some targets for TVL for these other protocols as well. And we'll try to hit them in the next 6 to 12 months as we launch newer applications.
Can you share those targets?
For lending, we're hoping to get to 1 billion TVL for lending. In other words, the exact example I gave you, which is I have Bitcoin, I want to deposit it into a lending protocol and borrow. We're hoping to get to 1 billion TVL in 6 to 12 months. Now you may say, hey, wait a minute, you already get to 6 billion TVL in Bitcoin staking. Isn't this 1 billion TVL a little bit of a smaller ambition? Actually not. Because staking, if you look at the DeFi economy, staking is something that many, many people are comfortable in doing. It's a very basic thing. It's a very low risk thing. But lending is a bit of a higher risk thing. And so much fewer people would participate in staking in lending compared to staking. So I think the 1 billion TVL is actually quite an ambitious goal already.
Sounds ambitious to me. What about quantum computing and the impacts on Bitcoin? We recently chatted about this on the show. So, for example, this relationship of secrets, right, and like a public key and a private key can be appended through quantum computing because it's much more efficient at doing certain operations, right? So, like, for example, then someone could access, for example, my private key or find out the private key that's linked to my public key. And if that would happen, this kind of breakthrough where you can more quickly arrive at the private key, you wouldn't necessarily even find out that much. Like, you could just go to a specific wallet address that holds quite a lot of Bitcoin, maybe not too much. It's not like a publicly known address or of a centralized exchange or anything like that, and just send over that Bitcoin, to yourself or some account that's been locked forever, where you're like, that person probably has lost a private key to it. Do you think about these vulnerabilities that might even change these cryptographic guarantees that we currently have, and then you won't have those guarantees anymore?
Yeah, so I should say that I'm not an expert in that area. This is a very technical area. So there are two types of cryptographic schemes. One is called quantum resistant, and one is called quantum non-resistant. And so cryptographers have a pretty good understanding of that. And if you look at Bitcoin, you will find that some of the cryptographic schemes are quantum resistant and some are not so quantum resistant. And so a lot of people are actually doing research in how to upgrade Bitcoin to be entirely quantum resistant. So now I think we still have some time because it will take us a while to get to scalable quantum computing. So I think people are already actively thinking about that. So I'm not super concerned about it. In terms of our scheme, since we're doing a lot of stuff off-chain, right? As I mentioned, gobble circuit off-chain. So we can easily upgrade our off-chain computation methods to be quantum resistant. So I'm not worried about that at all. We can make it quantum resistant so that you really have to have a correct proof before you can extract the secret, even with a quantum computer, right? So your worry is that your worry is basically quantum computer can easily break cryptographic scheme by extracting the private key even without knowing the private key.
Yeah, the link of your secret key to the public address, for example, the secret key that comes out of your circuit.
Yeah.
To the public.
Yeah, so the current guarantee that people have for cryptographic schemes like RSA that people use is such that if you have a normal computer, it will take you millennium, thousands of years before you can compute the private key from the public key. Because actually, in theory, the private key can be computed given the public key. Okay. For example, if we know how to factor a very big number into two factors. And so indeed, quantum computer can help you to solve some of these very hard problems using normal computers. However, there are other cryptographic schemes such that even if you have a quantum computer, you still can't compute fast.
Yeah, quantum resistant ones. But doesn't that tie into what you said, that Bitcoin is very slow to upgrade? Couldn't that then be a danger or whatever? More so there as like a different protocol that does all these forkless upgrades or whatever, like Polkadot or something.
Yeah, but if it's something of existential risk to Bitcoin, I think the whole community will get together to do the upgrade, right? Because if I can break a signature scheme of Bitcoin, if I can do proof of work of Bitcoin very fast without having to compute so many hashes, then I think the security of Bitcoin is threatened. And when that time comes, I believe the Bitcoin community, the core developers, will certainly get together to do the upgrade. I'm not too concerned about that.
But the upgrade has to come, or am I wrong? The upgrade has to come before that breakthrough when it's possible, because otherwise you cannot trust anymore, like the state, right? You can't trust the balances anymore to be really belonging to the people who owned it. Maybe that one is a hacked wallet, that one is a hacked wallet.
Correct.
So the upgrade has
correct.
to come before we get that quantum
Correct.
computing breakthrough, right? Last question, perhaps, because I've got taken up a lot of your time. How do you have time for all of this? I mean, you're still teaching, you're still a professor at Stanford, and you're leading one of the largest protocols here in crypto.
Yeah, I do 2 jobs. I don't sleep.
But
I don't sleep.
one during the day, one during the night, or how do you?
Yeah, but you know, in my mind, all of this is synergistic. It's research activities. Even on the Babylon protocol side, I'm focused on the research side, and so all this to me is very much towards research and open source science, and it's great. And I think having a real protocol, having a real system as a sanity check is always great in terms of making sure the research is heading in the right direction and not just going to la la land. So, yeah.
Amazing. Maybe last one. What do you think of the current kind of narrative towards more privacy oriented chains and primitives?
Oh, that's a super exciting problem, right? I mean, you talk about the Zcash, for example. That's a very old problem, but I think there's a lot of interesting problems today. In fact, I'm hoping to spend the next few months thinking about some of these problems. It's great. Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, but unfortunately, I have to run right now because I have a meeting exactly at 10:30.
Perfect timing. I'd say we're done. Thank you so much, David, and hope to have you on the show soon again.
Yeah, great meeting you, Soheil.